Channel 6 studios in Philadelphia, 6ABC presents Sunday Live with your host, Wally Kennedy.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Wally Kennedy. First up, the collapse of Pier 34 a week ago Thursday night. A special grand jury is being impaneled by the Philadelphia DA, and to the surprise of a lot of people on Friday, the city did not release its report on what happened. The question is, are there people who are going to be, because of their responsibility and their connection with the pier, criminally and civilly liable? One of them might be possibly the owner, Eli Karetny.
My heart is heavy. I can't tell you how sad I am. My heart goes out to the families who are injured and those who lost loved ones. Nothing's more important than life. My own two children work with me on the pier. They could have been out there at that very moment with me. We eat.
Sorrow may not be enough. The accident took the lives of 3 women, all employees in the New Jersey State Aquarium. They were killed and 37 others were injured when a 140-foot section of the pier collapsed, plunging them into the Delaware River. This week, the contractor hired to inspect the pier prior to the incident said he was stunned that the pier opened because several days before the opening of the pier, his company had issued a report to the owners that the pier was dangerous, both from an overall inspection level and especially from an underwater inspection level. The question is, who should pay criminally, civilly? Should the owners of the club be forced to stand trial and possibly face a jail sentence? And how much should they have to pay for the accident? This morning on our program, we're very pleased to welcome 2 attorneys. First of all, we welcome Edith Pierce, who is a personal injury attorney with Colbert and Friedman in Philadelphia, and also attorney Brian McMonigle, who's a former Philadelphia district attorney, assistant district attorney, I should say, who's in private practice now with McMonigle, Perry, and McHugh. And we certainly want to know what you think. Our telephone number, as always, and we invite your calls, is 1-800-916-2676. Good morning to both of you. Brian, with your background in the prosecutor's office, what does it say to you that the city didn't release its report and the DA's impaneling a grand jury? Could you see the 3 people who are responsible for owning this club and who, according to this contractor, knew full well that that was a dangerous situation? Could they go to jail?
The only way for that to happen is for the grand jury to make findings that, in fact, there was knowledge. And what I mean by that is the only way to assess criminal responsibility here is to determine that the owners, at the time that they opened for business and invited people onto that deck, they were aware of imminent danger, that the deck could in fact fall into the river. If they don't have that kind of knowledge, then I seriously doubt there's going to be criminal charges here.
But that's precisely the point. The contractor who was hired to appraise the pier said that they did know. He informed them.
That's the danger, and that's why you've got a grand jury in progress here, because you're going to have a lot of finger pointing. And they're going to have to come up with some hard facts. Are there letters? Is there documentation that would suggest that, in fact, there was direct knowledge? If they can establish that there was, and you may see an involuntary manslaughter charge here. But I seriously doubt it unless and until somebody can say the owner knew at the time he told people, come onto my deck, that he knew that deck could go into the river.
Well, you've got different degrees of ownership here. We're showing once again a picture of Eli Karetny, who was evidently pretty hands-on in the ownership and the running of the club. But you've also got owners who are in name owners, and they entrust the running of the club to other people. Is everybody liable, or are the people who are more hands-on more liable?
Well, there's a potential for everybody to be liable and nobody to be liable. And I think the problem that the district attorney has here is twofold. She's got to, first of all, find whether or not there's gross negligence. And that is, did they know that that deck could, in fact, create a danger to the people that were on it? And secondly, she's got to decide whether or not to extend criminal responsibility to an area that's traditionally been held in check by what the civil courts have allowed. You do have a remedy at law, and typically that remedy here for this kind of negligence would be the civil courts.
Okay. Now, Edith, let's talk about the civil courts here for a second. First of all, these 3 young women were in their late 20s.
Yeah.
You could argue that they literally had their lives ahead of them. And from everything that has been said about them, they sounded like wonderful, vibrant young ladies. In a civil court, is this the kind of case where the defendant would pay the maximum?
Well, that's hard to say at this stage in the game. With regard to any civil lawsuit, especially when there's death, I mean, there's many factors, but clearly when you have young people who have lost their lives, the damages are greater. Unfortunately, it's a morbid kind of evaluation, but the damages can often be greater than what...
Even though it's morbid, how do you evaluate it?
Well, there are many factors that go into it, not only earnings, but potential earnings, and if the person, with regard to somebody who died, there would actually be an evaluation as to whether or not that person actually felt any kind of suffering before perishing. And that is a kind of morbid evaluation, which would be...
How do you know?
Well, there would be experts on both sides, the coroner, there would be medical documents, and trying to determine whether they perished quickly or whether they suffered before perishing.
Okay, let's take a call. We want to know what you think. Hi, Sean. Thanks for holding. You're on the air. Hello, Sean. Go ahead. Sean, you got one more chance, and then I'm going to... Hello? I guess there's nobody there. Tell me how you assess monetary damages. I mean, how do you say this life is worth $500,000, or this life is worth $1 million, or this life is worth $1.5 million?
Well, in Pennsylvania, you can't actually say a life is worth an actual amount. In fact, when you present a lawsuit to a jury, you can't actually request an actual amount for a value of life. You would present all of the kinds, like I said, all of the suffering, all of the potential earnings, and the comfort and society that they would have given to their family. These are the things that you would present to a jury, but you cannot actually demand a number.
What about, so in other words, you present your case to the jury and the jury decides?
Yes.
Now, realistically speaking, that you're not suing the owners, you're suing the insurance company, right?
Well, you're suing the owners. The insurance company would determine payment. And in fact, the insurance company could bring an action saying that maybe they are or are not liable for this payment, depending on a policy exclusion, if such existed. Mm-hmm. So, no, the defendants are actually the ones held liable. The insurance company would cover payment for whatever that insured amount, and if the verdict was in excess of that amount, then the defendants themselves would be liable for that excess.
Okay, let's see if we can get Sean on the air. Hi, Sean.
Yeah, how you doing, Wally?
Good.
My question is, when they had an investigator or a company that inspected the docks, aren't they liable to, let's say, contact L&I and inform them of the findings, of the dock? Because doesn't L&I give the occupancy?
It's a good question. Even though the city is taking great pains to say it's privately controlled, it's privately operated, could the city, Brian, be a defendant in this case?
That's the dilemma that I think the district attorney has here, because if she's going to extend criminal responsibility here, where does she extend it? Does it stop with the owners? Does it include the engineering firm? Does it extend to the city? And then take it a step further. Does it open a Pandora's box for suits like this to turn into criminal prosecutions? And then where's the city in these suits? Do we then...
What do you think?
Well, do we prosecute SEPTA when they negligently maintain an escalator and a little boy gets hurt? Where do we draw the line? Typically, we have drawn the line in these cases to say, for acts of negligence like this, we'll handle them in civil court. When it gets to be gross, when you get behind the wheel of a car and you're intoxicated and you run a stop sign and you kill somebody, then we bring the criminal courts in.
Okay, let me do what you lawyers do all the time. A hypothetical. Let's just say, because Action News had this report days and days ago, let's just say that the contractor is on record as saying, I told him, and I told him 2 days in advance, that the underpinnings on the pier were dangerously worn, that they were tilting in a direction that would not be sufficient to support anybody standing on the deck. And in fact, previously, a piece of the deck had already fallen in the river. Yet, in the name of profit or in the name of money, they opened the deck for that party that night anyway, leading to this catastrophe, the deaths of 3 women and the injury of 37 other people. That's 41 people whose lives, 40 people whose lives will never be the same.
If that evidence exists, if that evidence is believed, they'll be prosecuted and prosecuted swiftly.
What for?
Involuntary manslaughter, probably multiple counts of recklessly endangering another person. If they can establish that kind of evidence, that's gross negligence, and they'll be on the hook.
Okay. Thank you both very much. Edith? Brian, thank you very much for being with us. Edith Pierce, who is a personal injury attorney, and Brian McMonagle, former prosecutor, now with us.